Hello and welcome to our, nobody can remember, maybe the 6th or 7th, what the fuck in our Carla, help me out. Number 7?
I think it's 7 actually, yes, of the year of 2021.
7th of 2021. The people who come to the webinars, it's growing. So every week or every 2 weeks, whenever we do this, we get more and more people and people stick around. So this is a really big KPI of ours. How many people enter the webinar and how many is still there at the end? We've actually got really high retention of participants. We did some analysis on this and it's because we're not shit. That was what the analysis threw up. We are not a boring product presentation. We have very interesting and lively debates. We do swear, it is true, we swear. Yeah, sorry about that. Not really sorry. Anyway, sorry, I've digressed. Right, rules, welcome. There are currently 80 people in the, 90 people in the webinar. What we're gonna do is just wait for a couple of minutes whilst all the stragglers come in. Many people work at cool companies, but other people work in big enterprises and they get stuck in the previous meetings and they're just exiting those meetings now and coming in as we speak. Whilst we're waiting for them, let me say hello to you, Matthew. Welcome back.
Hi, it's good to be here. Hi, everyone.
It's good to have you back. Now, Matthew will be reappearing to be the main event in about 15 minutes time after we've gone through all of our announcements. The first thing we'll discuss is housekeeping. So as you all know, this is a very safe space for you to be in. Partially, this is to do with our code of conduct. You can read the long form version by following the link that my colleague Carla is about to share. The short form version is this: try to be respectful to each other, try to be nice. If you're not, you're going to get chucked out. We do record these sessions. If you have got an objection to being recorded, please let us know in the chat box, either directly to myself or Carla or my other colleague, Teresa. You want to say hi, Teresa? Hi.
Everyone, welcome. Nice to see you.
And we will edit you out later. We will make sure that you do not reappear on YouTube and your face and name will be blurred out. If you've got a bigger problem with being recorded, we're very sorry, but we're not going to not record and you're going to have to leave. What have I missed, Carla? I always miss one thing on the housekeeping.
No, you remember everything today.
Oh,
well done.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Throughout the webinar, we will take questions. When I'm speaking, it's a little bit hard for me to field them, but when Matthew's speaking, I'll switch over to the chat box. I'll answer questions, I'll facilitate, but I'll do that along with Carla and Teresa. If for some reason you're feeling uncomfortable and you want to speak privately, reach out to Carla or reach out to myself and we'll see what can be done about that. Right, that's straight over then to the announcements. We've got a few really, really cool things coming up. Our book is free, right? It's not a bestseller. It's not like Matthew's book, right? Every time we do this together, there's like a 100-to-1 ratio between the stars he gets and the stars we get. And I like to think it's because we're niche, but I think it's because we're crap. But anyway, nevertheless, this book has proven to be very useful for people who are going to adopt cloud native and cloud native transformation. I'm not joking. It's become a handbook for those large organizations and executives who really want to get this right. It's now free to download. You can buy it if you like, but it's free to download from our website. And in fact, most of the content was already free. So we've never used the webinars as a way to sell the book, but please, if you need that, go ahead and download it. If you don't want to be spammed, just make sure you click the right boxes. Recently, we got an angry email from somebody because they wanted to come to the events. They'd registered for the events, but they'd also heard me say, you know, if you don't want us to spam you or send you follow-up emails, just click no more communication. So the person sent us an angry email saying, I never know when your webinars are because you don't send us emails. And we were like, but you unsubscribed from all communications. So you're actually registered from the webinar, but we are not allowed to contact you. So just bear that in mind if you want future updates on events. You have to click that one specific box. If you click it, a salesperson will not reach out to you. Don't worry about that, I promise. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, I think you all know about this by now. It is awesome. It's climbing and climbing and climbing in terms of people signing up, and we don't lose many people, hardly any. The following edition, which is coming out in a few days, is about, I do know this, ethics, Carla. Is it about ethics?
That's correct.
Very good.
You're nailing it today.
Yes, thank you. It's about ethics, robots, artificial intelligence, the fact that cloud computing is on the one hand awesome and on the other, driving climate change. All of these things are going to be discussed. We're going to have guest writers, guest bloggers, videos, animations. It's going to be awesome. That edition is about to drop in about 2 days. Sign up if you're interested. Independent developer platforms. This is a cool white paper, very much related to what Matthew's going to be speaking about. Grab that if you find it useful. And as I said, just unclick from further subscriptions. This is not a cheeky way to get your email address and to start spamming you. It's just a way to share the content that's really essential for our day-to-day work and that our customers really need. This is the Mac Daddy. What the fuck is SRE? So you want to talk about emergent strategy? Let's talk about that, baby. About 6-7 weeks ago, when did Nathan come on, Carla?
It was in February, the 9th of February.
And what is it today? April, right?
End of April.
So whatever, the difference between February and April, right? That's about, I think, 6, 7, 8 weeks. We did this webinar, what the fuck is SRE? Absolutely through the roof in terms of people participating, 600 registrants, 300 participants, something like that. So we said, let's just do a conference. And then all of a sudden, out of this idea and all of the branding we've been doing, we chucked up a landing page, attracted our first speakers, attracted our sponsors. We've now got 1,500 signups for the conference. It's completely free. It's completely free. And we even committed to, if we made any extra money from sponsors, we're going to put it back into further content. This will not reach the balance sheet of Container Solutions. You have my word. So if you want to go to that, or if you want to share it on your social channels, that will be really appreciated. We'd love to get to 2,000 in the next few days. And the cool thing is, for online events, all the magic happens in the last 48 hours. So if we can get trucking to 2,500, 3,000 with 1 week to go, I think this is going to be a mega event. So feel free to register, share away. And on that note, we've got some gossip. I do believe there has been some very foolhardish behaviour over at Basecamp. And I think that is where we're going to start with my wonderful colleague and friend, long-suffering friend, Adrian Moat. Adrian, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good. How's things there?
Very good. It's the Wi-Fi is holding up. We've had Wi-Fi issues today. How's sunny Edinburgh?
It's a little overcast. It's not too bad.
Very good. So tell us what's been going on at Basecamp.
Yeah, so this is, I suspect most of you have probably heard about this story. There's actually quite a lot to it, so this may take a moment. I apologize, Jamie.
No, that's good, mate. We all want to hear.
So Basecamp, most of you are probably aware, they make project management software, and they also not too long ago did that Hey email thing that's I think is doing quite well. It's run by two white males, and I say that because it does become relevant. Dave Hanmer Hansen and Jason Fried. And another relevant fact, I think, is that they've also published books and run podcasts. And best-selling books, and I think New York Times list of bestsellers books on how to run companies and how to do remote work. So these are people that supposedly had everything down. But basically, a few days ago now, they announced all these changes at Basecamp. The biggest one was probably this ban on political discussion. They also banned various committees, and they also banned 360 feedback. The reason for that was pretty bizarre. They banned it because they said it was too good, like everybody gave good feedback, so they banned it. Anyway, The Verge investigated this, and what they found was the reason that this happened was because internally at Basecamp, there had been for some years this best names list. I'm not quite sure how to describe this. Basically, they kept a list of customer, or some staff had kept a list of customer names that they found amusing.
Was Jamie on there? Jamie on the list?
Thankfully, they haven't published the list. Although at one point, DHH did go into details on some of the names. It's like, why did he do that? Like, it's clearly offensive. You don't have to break down like exactly who you offended. It's not going to help anyone. So that was a really strange part of all this. And
is it offensive, Adrian, because the list of cool names are actually names of people from minority groups in our community? Is that it's
just names that they found amusing. So it would have been people with, I don't know, like in the UK, maybe things like mycock, things like that. It's very puerile, I assume.
Right.
And that's a guess on my behalf.
Well, that is funny.
Don't get us in trouble. Okay, so they kept a spreadsheet of it, which is clearly, you're making fun of your customers. It's not a good look. And they didn't, it had been around for a while, so it hadn't been clamped down on. And basically people started complaining about this on their forums, internal forums. And it kicked off a big heated discussion. And The Verge found out about this. And Basecamp's, reaction to this was to stop all political discussion. So, there must have been some other discussions perhaps about Trump or whatever that they also hadn't appreciated. Unsurprisingly, Twitter went, pretty ballistic over all this. And there's been a lot of heated discussion on it. A lot of it revolving around how it impacts minorities more. Because when you ban political discussion, that's who gets cut out. Okay. But basically, in response to the Verge article, DHH, or Dave Henneman Hansen, doubled down. And he wrote this blog responding to it. And this blog, it really just made things 100 times worse. He talks about the spreadsheet. And like I said, he breaks down some of like what's in that spreadsheet. And at the end, this is the shocking bit to me, he offers 6 months' salary to employees that want to leave. So he's basically saying, like, we're doing this, get out if you don't want to be here. Which, yeah, so really doubling down. There's a whole bunch of problems with this. The first one is, how do you decide what's political? Every day we make political decisions, right? Naming a brand involves politics. Everything involves politics. And like I said before, it's really the minorities that are impacted most by this. One thing I really didn't like about his blog post is he keeps talking about how times have changed. And, it's never been okay to have this sort of email. It's not because times have changed. And okay, people maybe are a little bit more sensitive, but I really, that's just a cop-out in my view.
It does smack of privilege, doesn't it? Because
very much. I think that's, where it all comes from. Like, they kind of feel like they've been called out, and rather than taking the pain and saying sorry, they've.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK where we're from, Adrian, it's the people in the posh houses in the countryside who say there's nothing wrong with this country, while millions of people live in poverty. Oh, wow, we are getting political now. Okay, right, moving along then, wrap this story up and then we'll bring Ricardo in.
I'll just say a couple more things. It was, Basecamp were a very respected company, and they talked about empowering employees and respecting employees. So it's kind of very sad that it's come to this and just undone a lot of their work in like a week. Also, the employees don't seem very happy about this at all. If you go and look at the LinkedIn for Basecamp, you can see employees that aren't happy. And also they did a podcast on like remote work. And if you go and listen to the latest podcast, it's 1 minute long. And it like normally opens with some like this spiel about, Basecamp, the better way to do working. And they open it this time with our way to do working, and then just stop, because clearly the people that run the podcast are hugely against this.
There's also a feeling of dominance in this. A couple of people say, this is what we're doing. And a couple of people say, if you don't like it, you can leave. Yeah. So there's something really sort of, like, let's say the list was stupid and it was a mistake. I mean, these things, I suppose, can happen. But
but he admits that. To be fair, I think they accept that.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden, it's like he's totally in fight mode and he wants to fight. He wants to take this head on. Maybe he'll come out next week with an apology after everything's simmered down a wee bit.
Maybe.
Right. On that wonderful note, we've got 2 more pieces of gossip before we bring in Matthew for the main event. Ricardo, welcome back.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. That's very intense. Lots of drama. I have a couple of stories. I think they're a bit less dramatic, but yeah, I found. The first story I have is to do with John Deere. It's a story that was published 2 weeks ago. I only came across it recently. Forbes magazine published a piece on how John Deere, the agriculture equipment manufacturer, hasn't disclosed a single software vulnerability, like ever. Now, we can share a bit of a confused look on our faces, tractors and softwares, what's the link? Well, actually, agriculture is more and more a software-driven sector, particularly in the Americas. In Europe, for instance, farming is very intensive. It's concentrated on small croplands. There's a large number of smallholders, and for that reason, is still a relatively manual endeavor. And overall technology adoption is not very high. In contrast, particularly in the US, farming is extensive. Now there you have large croplands, and farmers there can take advantage of economies of scale, and they invest aggressively in technology. So while an average tractor in the UK may cost around £100,000, in the US it's not uncommon to see like a swarm of tractors, or each one of them can cost up to $1 million. And these high-tech swarms of tractors, they can have no drivers, they can be driverless, and they can run GPS, and they connect it to the internet, and they do precision farming. Also, they can send terabytes of data to John Deere's cloud, which these days is actually one of the most important drivers of revenues for the company. So there you go. John Deere is also a software company.
So John Deere has monetized their cloud. Their cloud absolutely generates revenue for them.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can dig that link up to John Deere's cloud, Carla, and chuck that in the box. Okay, and then moving on to our final piece of gossip: Apple's emotional roller coaster. Yeah,
so Apple's had like a crazy week. They're the most valuable public company in the world. They posted yesterday. They posted profits and sales, record profits, record sales, and they well exceeded investment analysts' expectations. Now, we need to think, should we invest in Apple stock or not? Well, first of all, we're not financial advisors at CS, so we can't answer that. However, some of the main investors are investing, like Warren Buffett, who famously didn't invest in tech. Now, the issue is, App Store is one of the main drivers of revenues for Apple as well. It accounts for about 30% of revenues. It's growing a lot. However, Apple famously charges a 30% commission on all services sold on its platform. It's called the Apple tax, and this is a huge amount. It's got some high-profile enemies: Spotify, Netflix. The most drama was probably around Fortnite and Epic Games. They were kicked out of Apple Store, and now the latest development comes this week, as the EU Commission. The reports the EU Commission will finally charge Apple's App Store with an antitrust ruling. And so now the key thing at this point is to see, is this important or not? Will Apple only pay a few billion euros fine and move on? Or if instead this is like a challenging regulatory environment, and the whole business model might crumble. Yeah.
I remember many years ago, it might have been 20 years ago, Bill Gates was brought to the EU, with monopolistic charges, and he just looked confused. He just looked confused and said, I don't know what I've done. Well, I don't want to pay that. I want to put my money over there. He really was a bit like Mark Zuckerberg Gates when he was younger.
Yeah.
On that note, by the way, I also think the Basecamp team and the Hey application, they had a problem with the App Store for similar reasons. I seem to recall that being discussed on Twitter. I am aware, by the way, that members of Basecamp come to our webinars, by the way. I am aware of that. So if anybody's on the line, you, of course, have all of our sympathies and compassions with, your current fight that has bubbled over into the public domain. On that note, it is that part of our wonderful webinar where we unmute ourselves and I stop sharing, because we are going to give a very large and warm round of applause to Matthew Skelton. The most wonderfully gifted writer, very generous communicator and teacher, a bit of a giant really in our community now. So Matthew, welcome back.
Good to be here. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everyone. By the way, the thing I should say about writing is it might look like it's all down to the writer. A significant part of the quality of the writing in any book, if the book is good, comes from the editor. My first advice to anyone who's thinking about writing a book: get yourself a good editor. It makes a massive difference, absolutely huge difference. So yeah, I mean, maybe I can write a bit, but definitely the editors from IT Rev were super awesome, absolutely awesome. So what should we do? Let's talk about platform as a product. I'm going to share my screen.
Matthew, whilst you're doing that, just let me reiterate to the participants, send us any questions you've got. If they're appropriate, I will interrupt and ask them in real time. If they're better answered at the end, I'll store them up and I'll bring them in the Q&A towards the end. So questions, and if anybody's feeling really brave in the Q&A at the end, you can unmute yourself and ask Matthew directly.
You should see some slides. Should have today's date on it. It should say V2. So we actually, this is the second time we've run this session a bit like this. Does anyone not see that?
Oh, good, Matthew.
Let's go. Here we go. So yeah, I wrote this book here, Team Topology's book. This was published September 2019. And I run a software consultancy called Conflux. And I've got a background as a software developer, and I've done all kind of other things. Increasingly, I don't really write that much code these days. I do write a bit, but I'm helping organizations with all sorts of stuff about becoming more effective with software delivery and so on. And the book's published by IT Revolution, the home of so many good books. You know, Accelerate, DevOps Handbook, Project to Product, and so on. Basically, any book that IT Revolution publishes, you should probably get a copy of. You should probably read it. They fit really nicely together. The Team Topology's book has been described as innovative tools and concepts for structuring the next generation digital operating model. It's about how do we think about how our organizations work? How do we bring people and technology together and make stuff really effective? So that quotation is from Charles Betts from Forrester. So in this context, we've got this concept of platform as a product. So what is platform as a product, and why should I adopt this approach? That's the question I'm going to try and answer in this session today. So we're going to start with, I'm just going to get the chat visible so I can just see what's happening with that. Here we go. So we'll look at what is a platform. We'll then look at what is really a product. It sounds obvious, but let's just take the time to do it. We'll look at some examples of platforms of product and a few ideas about getting started towards the end. So what is a platform? The definition of platform, or the starting point for our kind of definition or interpretation of a platform in the Team Topology's book, we took this definition from Evan Botcher, and he wrote this in 2018. A digital platform is a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support, which are arranged as a compelling internal product. Now, there's a huge amount to unpack from that little quotation, so let's do that right now. It's self-service APIs, tools, and services. API means application programming interface. It's kind of how computers talk to other bits of software, effectively, as opposed to a kind of a user interface, which is what a human uses. So self-service APIs mean that the groups, the people who are calling this platform, that are making software requests into this platform, can do that in a self-service way. In other words, they don't need to kind of raise a support ticket in order to be able to kind of connect to this platform. It's all self-service to enable them to do it themselves.
Sorry, Matthew, to disturb. I don't usually do this, but Evan's on the webinar.
Hey, hi, Evan. Good to see you.
You get a special shout out, Evan. So welcome.
We'll have a chat later.
He said thanks. He said thanks in the chat box.
That's good. Right. Brilliant. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Evan. I mean, it could be interesting actually later, Evan, if you want to, if you've kind of updated your thinking around this since that 2018 quotation, if there's anything kind of any additional insights or I don't know, nuances or something that you want to bring in later, that could be an interesting thing to discuss. If your thinking has kind of evolved or changed since then. But I think the definition is a really good starting point. So self-service is a really important part of this. We cannot have software development teams having to raise a ticket into some kind of support desk in order to get access to this thing or in order to be able to integrate with this thing. It needs to be self-service. There needs to be documentation tools to enable them to do that themselves. And so part of it is this knowledge and support that goes along with it. So we've got some really good quality kind of documentation, how-to guides, getting started, code examples, this kind of thing, or data examples or configuration examples. But of course, sometimes things go wrong. Things are work in progress. We need some support from real human beings. And so some support needs to be a first-class thing of a platform. And crucially, all of this stuff needs to be arranged as a compelling internal product. Compelling means that software development teams will want to use this platform. They want to use it. They go, wow, look at that thing. That's awesome. It's going to save me so much time. Let's go and use it. Instead of, so we're really focused on the kind of experience, the experience of teams using this platform. If it's a product, we'll have a look a little bit more about what that means, but a product effectively, it has a coherency to it. It's coherent in terms of the experience, in terms of the way it evolves. It's not just a collection of services that are thrown together and managed by the same group. It's a massive difference between those two different things. Back in May 2020, so almost a year ago, ThoughtWorks released their Technology Radar Volume 22. And almost a year ago, they said it's time to adopt product management practices to internal platforms. And at the time, ThoughtWorks said that it's now time to start trialing the use of platform engineering product teams. That means applying normal software development practices inside a platform. And we'll look at what that means a little bit later. So that was almost a year ago. And they said, we've been using the concepts from team topologies to split platform teams in our projects into enablement teams, core platform within a platform teams, and stream focused teams. So using the team topologies, team types and kind of concepts and interaction modes and things to think about how we kind of arrange work inside an internal platform. All good. I mean, it was amazing to see that in the radar back then. But check this out. So April 2021, this came out just a few weeks ago. The recommendation now is to adopt platform engineering teams. So this is in the ThoughtWorks Technology Radar version 24, so 2 versions later. And now they've had experience at ThoughtWorks in using platform engineering product teams inside platforms. And they say, look, this technique works really well. So go ahead and we recommend you adopt this approach. They do say avoid using what they call a layered platform team, which is where the groups, the teams inside a platform are split by technology. Don't do that. Make sure you follow the advice in team topologies and other places where you've got more of a product approach. So the relevant quotation here from the volume 24 Tech Radar is, we're still big fans of using concepts from team topologies as we think about how best to organize platform teams. We consider platform engineering product teams to be a standard approach and a significant enabler for high-performing IT. So if you want your organization to be high-performing in its information technology and its IT, then part of the solution to that seems to be to adopt this platform as a product approach. Let's just pause for a second. I'm going to throw up a kind of a statement which might seem slightly strange. To me, and to Manuel, my co-author, a platform is first and foremost a curated experience for engineers, the engineers being the customers of the platform. Now, sadly, that quotation there does not appear in the book because we didn't think about it until after the book has been published. Whatever, but that's how these things go. But as a starting, as the next step, so we've got the foundation, which is Evan's quotation that we had before, self-service APIs and tools and so on as a compelling internal product. But another way to think about the platform is this. Think about the experience of the engineers using it first. Use that to drive lots of decisions about how you run your platform, how you evolve your platform, and how you justify funding and all sorts of things around the platform. What is the experience for the engineers using it? And that experience needs to be curated, needs to be shaped, needs to be designed. The experience needs to be designed. So first of all, it's not about technology. The technology will be a huge part of it, but if you just obsess about technology, you will not get the benefits of platform as a product, and you won't get that kind of acceleration, which is one of the things that we expect. So if you're going to treat the platform as a product, it needs to be kind of reliable, it needs to be usable and fit for purpose. And the customers need to be voluntary. They need to be just like a customer. No one's going to force you to go to a particular supermarket or shop you're a customer. You can choose to go there or not. And that seems to be, generally speaking, a key driver for success with platforms and product. Evan Botcher, again, as part of that, his discussion about internal platforms back in 2018, says an internal platform should create a path of least resistance, make the right thing the easiest thing to do. So there's got to be kind of an opinion about what is the right thing. We've got to understand the right way of, I don't know, ingesting third-party data and presenting it out, or the right way of interacting with a container platform, or the right way of building software automatically, whatever it is. We've got to have understanding about what the needs are of our customers using the platform, and then make sure that the right way of doing things is really, really easy to help with adoption, to make it compelling for teams to adopt it. Again, we're thinking about experience. We're thinking about the user experience, some people call it developer experience, of the engineers who are using this platform. That's our starting point. And so that starting point is a million miles away from the starting point of platforms of the past, which were all about kind of cost control and license sharing, and we don't even care about what the developers experience. It's a million miles away from that. So just to, I want to bring in a few ideas from team topologies so that we can talk about some things with some common terminology. In the book, in Team Topologies book, we talk about 4 different kinds of team, 4 team types, which we think are really the only 4 types of team needed for organizations that are building and running modern software systems as a key part of their organization. And we start with a streamlined team, which has end-to-end responsibility for a particular segment of the business domain, particular slice. Might be a user journey, typically speaking, it's more kind of aligned to some sort of part of the business domain. And that's our starting point. That team has no handoffs. There's no other teams between kind of version control and live production. They've got end-to-end responsibility. So there's no waiting on other teams to do things. They build and run this software. The other 3 types of team you see underneath are effectively supporting this streamlined team concept. Enabling teams are teams of experts who do not own any part of the system, but just help to bridge any capability gaps in the streamlined teams, help them to maybe shift from one technology to another, and identify where skills mixes need to change. Complicated subsystem team is a kind of optional type of team. Ideally, we don't have one, but sometimes there's a need for really hyper specialist skills in one particular area to kind of simplify simplify how we work with a particular kind of part of technology. For example, like video processing or transaction reconciliation, something that needs a really, really high degree of skills, which should be difficult to find and place inside streamlined teams. Then we've got the idea of a platform team, which is there primarily, as we said, to provide a really good curated experience for these streamlined teams that are using it to help accelerate delivery in these streamlined teams. And what we're doing is kind of removing some of the cognitive load on these streamlined teams by simplifying or abstracting some stuff into a platform, things that are not related to, say, the business domain. We can make those available in the platform, and so the streamlined team can focus better on their main area of focus. There's lots of nuance around this, but that's the principal idea. So as I said, the streamlined team's got kind of end-to-end responsibility. They're getting rapid feedback from the live systems back into their team through telemetry, metrics, customer feedback too. Now, if we've got a fast flow of change in these teams, one way of giving a fast flow of change is to allow that team to build everything. So they're responsible for the business part, but they're also responsible for the infrastructure underneath, or the data, or whatever it is they need. And up to a point, that can mean they go really quickly because they're super independent. But over time, as we'll see later in this session, over time, that means they start to have to deal with so many things that actually their ability to focus on the main domain, business domain area, reduces over time. They've got less and less time available, less and less brain space to focus on their core kind of business area. So at some point, that's slowing them down. And so at some point, what you want to say is, look, everything kind of, if you like, logically below this conceptual level, it'd be great if that were handled by a platform. Then we can just focus on this, on the core business areas. We'll look a little bit more about that later. And that's where the kind of concept of a platform comes in. Things that are much less relevant to our kind of core domain areas. There's an option of putting those in the platform to enable multiple streamlined teams to go faster.
And Matthew, can I come in here with a question that's actually quite common? Is the, well, I'll rephrase it differently. I think people sometimes think there is only a platform, but if I'm to understand the book correctly, you can have to have multiple platforms in the same organization. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as you would expect, if you got a product, you don't just have a single product that deals with everything. I mean, unless you're talking about like a Swiss Army knife with all kind of, there's a spoon and there's a saw and there's a pair of scissors. I mean, they get unwieldy quite quickly. They get difficult to use quite quickly once you get more and more features on the penknife. You'd expect to have a few different kinds of products, a few different kind of things that focus on different areas. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to manage it as a product. Typically speaking, data sometimes is separate from kind of infrastructure. Sometimes that's separate from customer focused or customer facing marketing type stuff. Yes, you typically have a handful of different kind of platforms, if you like, in the organization that are managed as different kinds of products.
This is a question that well, it's not a question, but it's something we have to answer often. It's because people think you get a platform and then you have a bit of continuous integration and people just on board. And actually, we've been talking recently about a platform hierarchy. Does that make sense to you that a platform can consume another platform? Yep,
totally. I mean, if you think about it, if you're building any kind of infrastructure on top of AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or whatever, then you already have at least two levels of hierarchy. You have the stuff that Amazon provides or Microsoft or Google provides, and you have the stuff that you're laying on top. So you've immediately got a two-layer platform at that point anyway.
Do you ever wrap a complicated subsystem in a platform? Does that ever happen?
So since we wrote the book, we've kind of realized that a complicated subsystem effectively is a mini platform, and the way it should be managed effectively is sort of the same thing. Eventually, any complicated subsystem is probably going to end up being managed as part of a platform, or at least managed in the same way as a platform would be managed anyway. So a complicated subsystem effectively is like a mini hyper specialized platform. That's we don't talk about it exactly like that in the book. Yeah. I mean, we do hint at it, but since writing the book, that's effectively what we've realized. It's important to call out that as a distinction, because there are some different mindsets around platform versus complicated subsystem. But yeah, there are some strong similarities too.
Now, our Q&A, our dialogue has kicked off some questions, but I'm going to let you take those ones at the end, Matthew, and I'm going to ask you now to continue. And to Constantine and Alton, we're going to come back to those two questions when we finish the main.
There are some good questions. So yeah, thanks everyone for asking these questions. We'll probably bring some of those questions together and answer them in a coherent way.
Absolutely, go for it, Matt.
In the book, though, it's not just about, we've also got these three different kinds of team interaction. It's in any kind of sort of system or whether it's a mechanical system or a complex adaptive system, the behavior of the system is often governed more by the interaction of the parts or the actors rather than the properties of the individual things themselves. So one of the key things in the Teams Apologies book is to think about interaction modes between teams, between different parts of the system, and therefore between teams, because we identify a kind of mirroring between teams and parts of the system. So we've got these three interaction modes: collaboration, two teams working together for a specific period of time for a particular outcome, usually to discover how something should work, like where an API boundary should be or something like that. X as a service, so one team is providing something and one team's consuming something, and it should feel very low friction because the boundary has been well defined. Or rather, if the boundary has been well defined, there should be low friction in consuming or providing that service. And then facilitating is where one team is kind of helping another team to do something or bridge a gap or understand something better. So we'll end up coming back to those later. We mentioned kind of cognitive load on the teams. This is a really key concept that we introduced in team topologies, and it relates strongly to why we have a platform, why we need the kind of construct of a platform. John Sweller, the Australian psychologist, defined cognitive load back in 1988 like this. Cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort being used in the working memory. Now, when we're building software systems, we're using our working memory a lot. We're effectively learning about the business domain, whatever the business domain is. We're learning about how the technology works, because particularly nowadays, the technology is changing. There's a new JavaScript framework launched every 13 seconds now, Jamie? Something like that. Anyway, so we've got this continual learning process where we're not just applying what's already embedded, we're having to learn new stuff all the time. So developing and running software systems is kind of has a very intensive effect on our working memory, and therefore relates very strongly to cognitive load. We can look at 3 different kinds of cognitive load: intrinsic, which is broadly related to kind of skills that we've learned; extraneous cognitive load, which is sort of related to the mechanism of how we're learning things and what we're doing; and germane cognitive load is, if you like, the domain focus, the main stuff we're supposed to be focused on. So let's say, for example, let's say you're a Java software developer working in banking, something like this. So intrinsic cognitive load would be how classes are defined in Java. You've learned it, you just type it out. You don't even have to think about it really, because you've taken the time to learn it. But there's a finite amount of space for that kind of stuff, but we don't have to think about it too much. It doesn't really get in the way. However, extraneous cognitive load is things that get in the way effectively in this context. So if I have to ask myself, oh, how do I deploy this application again using this crazy deployment system? Then that's a problem, because that's not stuff I really should be having to think about. It should be much smoother than that. What I do need to keep in my head is how bank transfers work, because that's the domain that I'm focused on. I'm focused on some banking software. I need to have that in my head. I want to have the most space for the extraneous aspects. So what we're trying to do is, we've got an amount of intrinsic cognitive load that we need to carry, and we can kind of improve things by training and so on. We want to squeeze the extraneous cognitive load, squeeze and minimize the extraneous cognitive load, to leave more space for the germane aspects that help us focus on the kind of business domain that we're supposed to be working in. Crucially, the platform should not increase the cognitive load on teams using the platform. If anything, the platform should decrease the cognitive load for our development teams using this platform. And so that's an important design criterion for an internal modern internal platform. That should be one of the criteria we use in order to work out whether the platform is actually working or not. Does it decrease the cognitive load of teams who are using it? We've got the concept in the book as well of thinnest viable platform. And this is because there's a real danger that we just create platforms that are far too big. For those of you who recognize these chocolates, this is kind of what we're talking about. This is thinnest viable chocolate. I think it's called After 8 Mint, but there are various rip-offs that you can get in different countries. We certainly have them in the UK. You can't really get chocolate that's much thicker than this. This is what we're talking about. Something that's the thinnest possible kind of implementation of a platform. This is the smallest set of APIs, documentation, and tools needed to accelerate teams developing modern software services and systems. And here's the crucial thing. This platform is focused on accelerating the teams using it. We're not focused on, I don't know, technology or licenses or whatever. We've got, if you like, a higher purpose to enable these teams using the platform to deliver more safely, more quickly.
Matthew, if this is true as a heuristic and a guideline, why do so many people build the fattest viable platform every single time?
Yeah, that's a nice phrase, actually. Maybe you can coin that one. We can have a discussion about it. I mean, the danger, of course, that it can be quite compelling to be inside the engine room, inside the machine, kind of building out all kind of amazing, self-provisioning, self-healing stuff, and it's quite intellectually satisfying. The danger is that it's so disconnected from the kind of business goals that kind of we lose sight of it. And so that's why applying product management practices to a platform, as we'll see later in this talk, can be a really good way of kind of shaping the effort that goes into a platform. And this is part of the reason why this approach seems to be really useful, because it can help us avoid this kind of, what do you call it? Fattest platform in the world, whatever, this thing. It helps us avoid that massive platform. So here's Alan Kelly, longtime software kind of guru specialist. Software developers love building platforms, and without strong product management input, will create a bigger platform than needed. So he's basically just reiterating your observation, Jamie. Now, for us, a platform can literally be a markdown page or a wiki page that lists a set of services that are provided by an external provider. And when I say literally, I mean literally in the correct meaning of that word. I mean, the platform itself is that wiki page, is the definition. Because what we've done, if you remember, the platform is a curated experience. We don't have to build any software ourselves. We can just consume, we can define, we're going to use these 10 services from Amazon or these 9 services from Google Cloud and use them in this way with this configuration. That is the platform. But someone has gone there and curated it, has understood the needs of the software development teams in the organization, and they've worked out the minimum set of things needed to safely accelerate software delivery in the teams that are going to use this thing. And I'll just reiterate that again. You do not have to build any technology other than a markdown page or a wiki page that kind of collects this stuff together in order to create a platform. That can be in itself a platform because you've curated the experience. That's the starting point. Now, clearly, in organizations of any interesting size, where you've got more than a few teams, you will need to build some technology for sure. But the starting point should be the thinnest viable version of that. So a good platform is just big enough, but no bigger. We need to expect the platform to evolve, to change over time, particularly now with our, like I said, new JavaScript framework every 13 seconds. Technology is changing at an increasing pace. And that's part of that for lots and lots of reasons. Go and read Simon Wardley on kind of evolution of technology and so on to understand part of the reason for that. But we have to, we absolutely must expect that the services offered by the platform will change. New things will come in, but crucially, older services will be removed. And they might be removed in terms of implementation, or they might be removed in terms of we just don't even provide that thing anymore. It's just no longer necessary or no longer needed. We might build something initially because it doesn't exist, but then a couple of years later or 18 months later, a cloud provider has a great offering in that space, in which case, let's get rid of our internal implementation and use a thing from the cloud provider. We have to expect this thing to evolve. We have to set things up so that we have that expectation. And that's how we can use these different interaction modes to kind of help us listen for the right time to make some changes to the boundaries or the services offered by the platform. We're going to expect teams within a platform to collaborate strongly with the Streamline team customers who are using our platform. We're going to collaborate strongly when we define any new service or when we start to evolve it. What does that look like? So we've got, let's say, a Streamline team in yellow and a platform team in blue start off collaborating, working really closely together to work out what this new data service should look like. Let's work really closely together, maybe for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, a fairly short period of time. And eventually we get to the point where we can actually offer that data service as a service. There's no need to work really close together. We've defined the nice API, we've defined the kind of runtime characteristics, and the Streamline team can now just consume this without really very much extra kind of interaction, which is kind of what we want because X as a service scales really well. Collaboration doesn't scale. Collaboration doesn't scale very well at all. So we want to get to the point where we define the service boundary in a good way and it's friction free. We can just consume that new service. And we're expecting to kind of provide support and good documentation once this is stabilized. Generally speaking, we've got this kind of pattern. We need to discover stuff and then over time establish it into an effective service. So even the way in which teams from a platform interact with other teams outside the platform changes over time depending on what we're doing. So the feeling or the kind of the sorts of conversations you have and the amount of time you spend pairing with other people from a different team will change depending on what you're doing, and has to do. So what we're trying to do effectively is clarify these service boundaries and provide some nice abstractions to reduce cognitive load on these streamlined teams that are using the platform. And that should be kind of something that's fundamentally well understood by anybody who's working inside a platform. That's what we're trying to achieve. We'll look a little bit later at an example from a company called USwitch, they're based in the UK, about how they did some things in this space and how it really worked for them. So look out for that in a little bit. Before we do that, we're going to just go briefly through what really is a product. So bear with me, because it's actually quite important. Okay, Wikipedia says a product is anything that can be offered to a market to satisfy the desire or need of a customer. All right, fair enough. That sounds pretty straightforward. Let's have a look a little bit in a little bit more depth. So Marty Cargan from 2010 talks about a product being a kind of a holistic user experience, combining functionality, design, monetization, and content. So we've got that word user experience in there, the kind of holistic view. We're starting to think more about the kind of experience part of this product. Marty's actually written a book recently called Empowered, which if you get a chance to read and buy it, you should do that. There's a copy on my bookshelf. Yeah, there is. You might be able to see it behind me, Empowered anyway. It's a great book. Marty's been working with teams and product groups in this space for a very long time. All right, so let's say I go into the center of Leeds and I look outside a sports shoe shop. So this photograph here I took literally about 10 months ago in the center of Leeds where I live. And there are some sports shoes in the window. Fine, whatever. But a product is optional. Nobody's going to come out of the shop and force me to buy or force me to use a particular pair of sports shoes, right? The product is optional to use. No one's forced to use the product. That's point one. Second point, the product is carefully designed and curated. Someone's thinking about what the user needs are for that product. They're going to shape it carefully. They've got kind of a high degree of empathy with the person who's going to use that product. The third point, the product is going to simplify something for users. This machine here, well, this is a photograph of a machine that I took. This is actually in San Francisco on the pier. They've got like a museum of old jukeboxes and stuff like this. This is like an early version of Spotify. Basically, you put a quarter in the slot and you press the button and it plays the song on an old turntable. The point is, this is simplifying something for the user. Instead of like this, obviously going back like more than 100 years, instead of having to carry around my own turntable and stack of records, I just carry around a set of quarters and I can pop it in the slot and get my favorite song whenever I want. It's simplifying something, simplifying my life somehow. The product also evolves to take advantage of technology changes. It's not static, particularly with the speed of change of digital silicon-based, whatever, digital-based technologies nowadays. It's absolutely crucial. We're expecting to change. We're designed for change. Okay, so let's now apply this to an internal digital platform. Remember, a platform is a curated experience for engineers. We're thinking about the developer experience or the user experience of people using this platform internally. So what are the implications? So therefore, a platform is optional to use. No team should be forced to use a platform. If it's a product, platforms must advocate for their platform product and market it to internal teams. They should say, well, what would make it compelling for an internal team to want to use our platform? Well, it's going to have really good documentation. It's going to be really easy to use. There's going to be a nice command line interface to it. There's going to be, and so on and so on. They're thinking, well, what would it take to make it really nice to use? Right, let's build that. So a platform is also carefully designed and curated if a platform is a product. We're thinking about what teams need. We're designing this with the user in mind. We've got this strong focus on user experience or developer experience. The platform is simplifying something for users. So platforms must help users to achieve their goals by understanding their user needs and simplifying some tasks. So we can use approaches like user persona and other typical user experience kind of approaches, which are well known in the kind of user-facing kind of agile software space, but have not been applied very much to internal platforms yet. But the skills are all there. The skills are probably there in your organization already to be able to work in that kind of way. And the platform should evolve to take advantage of technology changes. So we need to have like a clear roadmap and trajectory for adding and removing features or things from the platform. Crucially, this platform, this internal platform, should use modern product management and service management approaches. Okay, this is not traditionally the kind of space where where certainly historically lots of internal so-called platforms have not been using product management or effective service management approaches. The good thing, the nice thing, right now, 2021, is there are examples from hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations around the world who use modern product management approaches to their product offerings, which are effectively platforms, and they talk about it. They blog about how they apply these techniques and how their internal software delivery works. So we don't need to invent anything. We use the techniques that these companies already use, and we apply them internally inside our organization to our internal platform. So a platform needs modern product management and service management techniques, as demonstrated by cloud software as a service companies. We're not inventing anything. We're applying these existing practices, proven practices, internally into our own platform. So that means we need kind of product metrics. Crucially, we can use the 4 key metrics from the Accelerate book. If you don't have a copy of Accelerate, go ahead and buy one at the end of this call, by the way. It's another book from IT Revolution, publisher of Teams Apologies. And the 4 key metrics that they found, which were really crucial for high-performing organizations, were lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore in live after an outage, and the change fail percentage. Now, these can be applied inside the platform to the services that the platform actually provides. So how long does it take, to roll out a new change to the logging service, for example? How often do we deploy changes to the single sign-on service, something like this? But also, crucially, these 4 key metrics should be applied to teams using the platform. And the platform should help teams to improve these 4 key metrics when they use the platform. So a team that's using the platform should be expecting to improve its lead time, shorten its lead time by using this platform. So it actually starts to get very interesting, some possibilities around being able to drive the right kind of behavior, the right kind of focus by using at least these 4 key metrics with a few other metrics too. But it's a nice way of framing what does success look like. We can use some user satisfaction metrics. And our users, of course, are the internal teams using the platform. So we can run some little some questionnaires like these. So this is from a company called Twilio. They do web communications or online communications, APIs and things. And they run like a little questionnaire like this internally every I can't remember, every 6 months or something. They ask developer or people in the development teams questions like this. They'll say, I can effectively build my software, yes or no. I feel platform tools are consistently improving, yes or no, and so on. And effectively, they actually go even further than this, and they use NPS, Net Promoter Score, which is like a consumer-focused kind of recommendation score, but they do it internally. So they're taking practices from cloud and SaaS products that are used out on the internet, if you like, and they're applying that internally into their internal platform. We need some metrics around adoption and engagement. So how many teams are currently using this platform versus not? And what would it take to persuade more teams to use the platform? Where are the gaps right now? So looking at There'll be a bunch of teams who are currently using the platform and a bunch of teams that are currently not. Let's look at that adoption and what would it take to simplify the lives of the teams who are currently not using the platform. And we need some, fairly low-level reliability metrics, SLI, SLOs, the stuff you'll have heard of in the SRE session on this webinar a few weeks ago, if you were in that. So that's the reliability of the kind of software systems that you're running as part of that platform. You need all this stuff in place, but we're starting with the product metrics. And ultimately, the success of the platform teams is really tied to the success of the streamlined teams using the platform. That's why the platform exists. It's to enable streamlined teams to go faster safely. So the platform might have the best tooling and the best features in the world. If it's not helping these streamlined teams deliver faster safely, you kind of missed the point. Okay, let's have a look at just a couple of examples. This example is on our website. This is an example from USwitch. It's a UK-based consumer comparison website for things like broadband, mobile phones, gas and electricity, this kind of thing. The full link is in the slide deck, which will be online soon. A really, really brief overview of their situation. The business works across multiple very different domains. So switching your mobile phone contract, switching your energy provider, or switching broadband are very, very different. Very different kind of constraints. They've got different regulators in the UK. So the way the business works in these different domains is very different. They started off a few years ago with teams in these different domains being highly independent, building everything themselves, running everything themselves, and that was fine because they were independent. Logically, these are independent business domains, and it enabled the mobile team group to go really, really quickly without any kind of dependency on what's happening in energy or broadband. But over time, these teams were dealing with an increasing number of low-level kind of infrastructure API calls. They're having to think about more and more stuff underneath mobile or underneath energy or underneath broadband. So the cognitive load was increasing because they're having to think more and more about the kind of infrastructure, the non-differentiated, non-business domain related stuff just to be able to run that service. So at some point, this became a problem. These teams were effectively slowing down in terms of delivery on the business domain because they were thinking about so much infrastructure. In this particular case, it's Amazon AWS. So they realized they needed to introduce something to abstract away a lot of this non-differentiating infrastructure. And they chose the container orchestration tool Kubernetes. But crucially, Paul Ingalls, who is now the CTO at this company, said, we didn't change our organization because we wanted to use Kubernetes. We used Kubernetes because we wanted to change our organization. They deliberately chose a tool that would kind of put in this abstraction and hide a lot of the non-differentiating complexity from these teams precisely to reduce their cognitive load and enable them to focus on the business domain. So really important design decision for their platform. They're thinking about cognitive load on the teams. They're thinking about flow of change. They're thinking about what is business relevant. And that was a really key part of the success of this platform, was because they had that at the heart, that kind of decision at the heart. And as they introduced Kubernetes, they could start to see the number of kind of native calls through to Amazon infrastructure dropping off. Effectively, that's also a drop off of the cognitive load, the extraneous cognitive load on these streamlined teams that should be focused on broadband or mobile or whatever. So their platform purpose was to enable streamlined teams to deliver work autonomously with self-service capabilities. And explicitly, they realized they needed to reduce this extraneous cognitive load on streamlined teams. Again, from Paul Ingalls, CTO, we wanted to scale our teams, but maintain the principles of what helped us move fast: autonomy, working with minimal coordination, and self-service infrastructure. And effectively, they ended up treating the platform as a product. I'm just going to skip one or two. 2018, they started this new platform. with just their first team, their first customer, their internal customer, some simple stuff around centralized logging and metrics and auto scaling. But then they started to evolve it. They started to add a few things that were inspired by SRE, for example, SLAs, SLOs, clarifying kind of reliability and so on. And they could start to see the traffic growing. But at no point was any team forced to use this platform. There's no forcing any teams to use this. The platform team was listening to customers, engaging with them, listening to what they need, building the appropriate things that ended up as a kind of curated experience. And then eventually, the team that had the highest money, what they call the highest money-making team, effectively the most important team, looked at the platform and said, wow, that's great. We don't want to do all the stuff that platform's doing. Let's move on to the platform now, because we can see that we would still be quick, or maybe even quicker, by using the platform compared to just doing it ourselves. So in the space of, it was about 2.5 to 3 years, without forcing any team to use the platform, all teams were now on the platform. They'd chosen to adopt it because they could see the value. And actually, there's a diagram on the case study on our website that actually speaks to what you were saying before, Jamie, about multiple internal platforms there. We've got a cloud infrastructure platform, a consumer data platform, and an affiliate marketing platform. So that kind of is a real world example of where it's not just a single big monolithic blob of a platform, that there's, as you'd expect with any kind of thing that's producty, it needs to have coherence. We're not saying there's 100 different platforms, but there might be some differentiation internally. There's also some nice examples from Adidas. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but they've given talks. You can see there's a YouTube talk here from, I think it's from DevOps Enterprise Summit. And they talk about how they use some of the ideas from team topologies to guide how their platform, how different teams in their platform engage with other teams.
Hello, sorry, just
go for it.
It's in the book, Adidas.
Yay!
It's in the book, and the book is free to download. Did you not hear me coughing, Matthew?
No,
Did you not hear me coughing? Wow, we'll work
so at the end of the call, or even now, I think is there a link? Someone put a link in the chat, so you can go and download that book. That's the Adidas case study is in there. One thing that's super interesting here, and that's actually an important kind of cloud native pattern, is just look at the amount of time that they spend on platform advisory and community. They spend about half of their time doing that. It's not that we're all focused on building technology. We're thinking about the user experience. We're thinking about the needs of our customers. And we spend a lot of time on that. We spend a lot of time doing that. It's not just heads down, cranking out YAML all the time. Sorry if that's what we like to do, but that's not what is needed. That's not what's there for success. And a super quick example from Spotify. The way they have their internal kind of delivery platform set up is they've got 3 different routes, or 3 different kind of options, if you like. They've got the kind of paved path, paved road, which they call engineering portal templates. It's basically, if you want to get started quickly and you don't have any particular needs or particular specialism, then just use that and it'll work really well. If you need to customize things a bit, you can do a bit of customization. Or if you want to kind of build your own routes to live, you can just use an API. But again, it's been curated. We're thinking about what users need. We're designing good routes, good ways of working, and kind of providing a bit of differentiation for teams to be able to have the most suitable experience and way of working. Okay, a quick recap. What is platform as a product, and why should I adopt this approach? A platform is optional to use. No team is forced to use the platform. Instead, we have to kind of advocate for it. We have to listen to our internal customers and respond to those needs. The platform is then carefully designed and curated. We're shaping the experience. We're shaping what's provided. We're thinking about decommissioning things, and we're thinking about the kind of long-term roadmap. It's simplifying something. It should not make it harder. It should simplify something and make it easier for us to get on with our main focus, our main job. We're expecting the platform to evolve. So we're definitely thinking about kind of version 1 versus version 2 of an API. We're making sure that people are transitioned off the older stuff at the right time and so on, just as we would expect with a commercial cloud platform. And crucially, we're using modern product management and service management techniques to make all this stuff work. So literally, we have product managers inside the internal platform, and there might be, you might have a product manager for metrics and logging. You might have a product manager for customer data, whatever. We've got product manager for these things inside the platform. Why? We've got happier users, so happier engineers who are using this platform. We're helping to avoid kind of technology bloat. We're helping to avoid this, whatever Jamie called it, the kind of fattest possible platform that we talked about before. And we're making sure this thing is designed to evolve with the pace of technology change. That has to be part of what we're doing. So a few ideas now about getting started with this approach with platform as a product. To start with, think about assessing the current cognitive load on teams inside the organization, particularly teams that maybe if they're already using something like an internal platform or an internal set of shared services. We've actually got a team cognitive load assessment on GitHub. It's linked there. Actually, ThoughtWorks in Technology Radar 24 said that they've been using this and they found it useful. It will evolve. We're actually doing some more work around assessing cognitive load, but just try and get a feel for whether teams currently find it easy or difficult or even impossible to use some of the services that are currently being provided. That should start to guide where you, which things you tackle first, effectively. If one particular thing is really hard to use, maybe it's worth putting effort into that area to reduce the cognitive load on teams that are trying to use it. Second thing, just try and define what your platform currently does. There's so many organizations that just have a collection of stuff, and there's no description of this product. There's no description of the services that are actually supposed to be there and provided. What we find is that when people start to define it, literally just write a wiki page or whatever, write a Word document or something, Google Doc, as you start to write down how this thing currently works, you realize, that's probably not the best experience for the users, the engineers who need to use it. There's clearly a need for improving the experience in that area. So just go ahead and kind of document what you've currently got and describe it as if it were a product, just like AWS, Amazon, Google, Azure describe their platform with documentation. Try and do something kind of equivalent, and you'll probably spot opportunities for improving. Think about team interactions. If we ended up with a different set of responsibilities for different things, if you like, so if we're moving some stuff into a platform, what would the effect be, and how much would we need to collaborate in order to get something done? So use the team interaction modes to explore the effect of putting a boundary in one place versus another place. There's many more platform examples that they're all linked in this particular slide here, so you'll be able to get those after the session. There's Zalando, Mercedes, Twilio, Adidas, ITV, MAN, Truck and Bus, and Farfetch. There's loads of really good examples now online from organizations doing this effectively. There's an article that we published last year relating to reducing cognitive load and increasing flow. It touches on platform as a product. That's on Tech Beacon. And we've got some infographics. These have just been published in the last few weeks. So getting started with team topologies and kind of team topologies in a nutshell. And these include some kind of principles or suggestions of how to get started more generally, not just with platform as a product. We've got a whole bunch of resources online. If you head to teamtopologies.com/resources, and there's some tools as well linked to teamtopologies.com/tools, you'll find some there. We have a learning academy launching soon in the next few weeks. If you go to academy.teamtopologies.com, then there's currently a holding page, and you can sign up for news, and eventually there'll be an online self-paced video training. Later this year, we will have something covering modern platforms. We're not sure exactly when that'll be. Probably sometime after July. That'll be available. We've got an introductory course launching soon, and we're starting to work with partners like Container Solutions to bring some of these ideas to the kind of wider industry and so on, and get more traction. So, thank you very much, everyone. It's now time, I guess, for some questions.
Thank you. Bravo, Matthew. Bravo. There are some really good questions. I'm going to start with this one. My internet dropped, so I'm doing this from memory. The platform team often gets to do all the shit, such as GDPR compliance and all the rubbish nobody else wants to do. What is your opinion on this? Don't say get a new job.
So it is a common pattern historically. A platform can provide some services that can make make it easier to deal with GDPR, for example. But ultimately, it's still the responsibility of individuals, kind of products or streamlined teams to be compliant. So there's going to be some kind of evolution of where that responsibility sits. If one particular product needs to have, say, GDPR compliance in its product as soon as possible, if the need is really great, that product should build it themselves, because that's where the impetus is. You shouldn't be waiting on some platform to build it for you. However, maintaining that kind of GDPR related stuff is not necessarily directly related to, I don't know, banking or selling pizzas. So eventually it probably makes sense to explain how you've built that to other parts of the organization. And eventually then there's probably a business case for a platform to be to take on some of that responsibility. But we've got to get these dynamics right. It's not a case of forcing people to use a centrally built GDPR compliance thing. The platform can provide something like that, but there should be an option of teams going into loan if they need to. And it sets up a really good, healthy dynamic where we should have a good dialogue about what's the right way to build stuff and what can we feasibly build in a particular time frame.
Right, here's a really thoughtful question, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive load for development teams should definitely be a target, reducing cognitive load, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that complexity has to go somewhere. And we're finding that the load of the administrative teams and those adding features to the platform is really stretching their platform team. How do we avoid burning this team out?
So part of this should be about highlighting, bringing to the surface the cognitive load challenges inside the platform teams as well. So use the cognitive load assessment that I linked earlier, or something equivalent. There's some assessments from NASA, for example, that we're looking into. But highlight that and use metrics like the 4 key metrics from Accelerate, but apply them inside the platform and raise that as a problem. If effectively, if the organization has set up a trade-off, a kind of fight between the kind of streamlined teams, external customer-facing teams, and the platform, the organization needs to resolve that. It cannot be that you're just pushing anything you're not interested in into a platform and just expecting them to deal with it. It shouldn't be a case that we should absolutely not be pushing stuff into the platform. And we do talk about that in the book and in some talks and things, but it's more productive than that. The platform product owners need to be listening to what the streamlined teams are saying and go, okay, there's a clear need for dealing with, like GDPR or dealing with whatever it is, some kind of new financial regulation. We can build something over the next 6 months to deal with that new regulation, but it isn't going to be available next week. And we are not going to drop what we're doing right now just to jump on it and fix it because you as a streamlined team forgot to include that in your roadmap. It's not going to happen. Just as AWS and Amazon and Azure and Google Cloud are not going to suddenly jump on some new feature request from a customer just because that customer assumes that we should magically be able to create photorealistic deepfake cat videos, because whatever, it's just not the way that it works with external providers. So it shouldn't work with internal providers either.
Maybe I can add something to that. In our experience, when you get a platform, all of a sudden the expectations are super high and everybody says, oh, I need my apps to be up 99.99% of the time. In reality, that's not true. And if the platform team has to meet such high service level agreements for everybody. So that's something to consider, maybe budgets for that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that you end up being able to derive slightly more easily if you manage your platform as a product is kind of cost tracking at the very least. I mean, some organizations do cost chargeback, but at the very least you can do cost tracking, and you can say, well, actually, if you want 4 nines or 5 nines availability, then it's going to cost you more, or it's the cost that we're tracking back against your application is higher. So it does open up, and obviously cloud opens up from your cloud native patterns. You've got all of that stuff in there about kind of cost tracking. That's an advantage of using the cloud, is precisely that you can actually start to have very fine-grained cost tracking and therefore map that back to specific applications that you're using the platform.
Here's a good question. I'd love to answer this one myself, Matthew, but it's of course for you. In this era of product managers and engineers working hand in hand, does that mean the platform team should provide the documentation, processes, and a knowledge hierarchy? Should they be responsible for educating their users?
Well, just like any product, you'd expect some documentation around it. If the product is super easy to use, I mean, to an extent, the need for lots of documentation is a bit of a bad smell, isn't it? Like, the product should be super easy to use, and you shouldn't need too much documentation. So too much documentation is like a sign that your product's too hard to use. But it needs some in there. But focus more on the user experience rather than kind of educating users. If you do need to do a lot of education, just make the product easier to use. I mean, we've got software. This is what we can do. We can evolve it really quickly. So I'd focus on the kind of UX or developer experience side. Get user experience people in your platform and get them thinking about the experience of developers and testers and other people, data engineers, using this platform and thinking, is this what is this the experience we want? How can we make that experience better? Rather than focus on education, focus on kind of UX, making it much easier to use, less friction in using the platform.
Thank you. I don't know if somebody was playing music then. Did anybody else say that, or was that just me? Okay.
I heard it.
Anyway, there was the music. I don't know who was doing that. Sometimes that does happen. The best thing was when somebody once took a sales call and didn't mute themselves. And we were trying to find out who it was, and he was haggling with a customer. It took us a few seconds to mute him. Okay, brilliant, Matthew. That's great. Right, more questions. What about this? I think this might be a short answer. What about you say that platform should be optional, but what happens if an executive has spent all this money and he has to see adoption, or she has to see adoption, and therefore makes it mandatory?
Well, then you'll start to see failures. If you need that platform to be adopted, then spend your effort, rather than spending your effort on forcing people to use it, spend your effort on outreach, advocacy, listening to what your internal customers actually need and making sure you build what they need, rather than forcing them to do it. If you're having to force people, then the product isn't good enough. That's the only situation in which a product is forced onto people, generally speaking, is if it's a sign that it's not actually what people want. If it's what people want, then people will adopt it without being forced.
And of course, what does this mean, Matthew, for these large enterprises who just don't know how to build products, because they learn about cloud and they read your book and then they're like, oh fuck, we've got a whole bunch of skills missing. Yep, exactly. So it's going to be very challenging for lots of organizations in this space. The nice thing, the ray of sunshine about this is that the industry, kind of software industry, whatever, generally kind of pretty well understands how to kind of manage software as products now. We've got all the techniques around user experience. We've got all the techniques around design, things like design systems. You can have a design platform. That could be another kind of platform. And literally what we talk about in the Team's Bodies book, it's a set of templates, a set of principles. It's a way of being able to design stuff for your users that removes some cognitive load. And we, like I said, we can apply these kind of product management techniques into our internal platform. So we don't have to invent any kind of new skills. We have to find people who are willing to work in a slightly different context. So instead of it being like consumer facing, for example, or external business facing, it's now internal facing. But a lot of the principles are the same.
But yes, I mean, some organizations will fail. This is for sure.
We've got time for one more question. I think it's a very specific question, which means it should be easy to answer, and maybe it's on the minds of many people. Is the platform team mostly concerned with non-functional, and is the Streamline team mostly concerned with business logic implementation?
No. It's a good question, but that's absolutely the wrong way to think about it in my view. The Streamline team should absolutely be thinking about performance, security, scalability, operability in general, logging, the quality of metrics, all of this stuff. This product team, Streamline team, needs to think about those things. However, they should not be building the infrastructure that enables them to be secure. They should not be building the infrastructure that enables them to do modern logging, and so on. But they need to have a very strong awareness of the operability of their software services for sure. It's just that the provider of the simplification around logging or metrics or security is in the platform. But we're not splitting by business logic versus non-functional requirements. We're not doing that split. We're taking business logic and all of the kind of non-functional things into the Streamline team. It's just that how those things are done, provided, how security, logging, metrics, whatever are provided, compliance provided, they're provided by the platform as a kind of generic service that can be consumable and implementable by these Streamline teams. It's a really important distinction.
That's a brilliant answer, Matthew. Now we're going to wrap up now because people are dropping off because they've got to run to the next meetings or run to the bathroom before the next Zoom meeting. Before we say our goodbyes and our thank yous, just a couple of things. If you're on the webinar today, and lots of people do come to these webinars with their colleagues and their teammates, and you want to do an extra session, just reach out to myself or Sam Shenton, who's on the Zoom chat, and we can discuss that. So we often do smaller roundtables. We did one last week with a couple of different companies struggling with the same things, and that was really successful. So we're happy to do follow-ups like that at a later time. If you've got any further questions for us, you can follow us on Twitter at Container Solution or just search Container Solutions. Carla, myself, or Teresa will field any questions about upcoming events and how we can provide the right content for you at the right time. On that note, I will do the following. I will ask you to unmute yourselves to say thank you to the team from Container Solutions. That's Teresa and Carla, Greg, I'm not sure who's here today, Adrian, Ricardo, and Sam, who joined me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling for your wonderful host.
Thanks.
That's me. Well done, Jamie.
Well
And say
done.
your biggest round of applause for Matthew Skelton, who's come in today and absolutely smashed that. He'll be back at some point in the future, and I'm sure he's working on version 2 of that book. At least I hope he's, because I want to see it. Matthew, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
See you all next time. Bye.
Bye.